This is Revs Confidential with Julian Cardillo and Frank DeLapa.
There we are. Frank, we're back again. I don't even know what episode number this is of Revs Confidential, but the point is that we're live, we're here. Good to see you, Frank.
Good to see you.
How you doing? New week. We actually have a bye week right now with the Revolution. That's pretty exciting. Get a week off before August 9th. They host DC United, and they're going to have the Legends game, which I'm excited to talk to you about, actually. But yeah, I mean, Frank, 30th season here. You've been covering this team since the very beginning. I keep reporting in the Herald that they're kind of reaching these historic lows. Now, what's interesting is that the record says that they're pretty bad, but personally, I think there's actually a decent amount of quality on the field. It's just not clicking, and there are a lot of different reasons for that. But I'm wondering if you feel the same way. I think that this team would beat the crap out of the 2011 Revolution and certainly in the 1998 Revolution. But maybe I'm looking at things from glasses that are too rosy. But what do you think about that, Frank?
Yeah, I think that's accurate. There's just something missing, I mean, I think they're not too far off, but this is a game of, it's a game of millimeters and milliseconds. It really is. And those things just aren't happening in those key little times, for this team. And yeah, they're not far off, but it's those intangibles that they're just missing. If you don't have the chemistry and it's not working, it's tough to get it. But they do have a lot of things in place and a lot of things going for this team.
Yeah, they're just far off enough, right? Just far off enough. So, listen, objectively speaking, it is pretty low. They welcomed Montreal to Foxborough last Friday night. I actually thought that the game went just about how I expected it, to be honest with you. I didn't think that they would lose, but I did think that Montreal would show up and play better than their record suggests. People don't know this, or maybe they do know it, but they don't necessarily think about it right away because Montreal's coming in and they're the worst team in the league. But Prince Owosu comes in with 10 goals. Mm-hmm. No player on the Revolution has 10 goals. So he's the real deal. He'll get in the end of things. And, for all the talk of the Revolution having a full week to prepare, they had a makeshift back line. I thought on the first goal especially, Prince Owosu takes advantage of Wyatt Omsberg for positioning. He had more than a half a yard, but a player like that really just needs a half a yard to turn, take a shot. It's going to find the frame. And then, things really unraveled from there. Like I said this in the Herald, Frank, I feel like the big issue with this team, and it is a coaching problem. It is definitely a coaching problem, but it's also a personnel on the field problem, is that they really, really are terrible at adjusting. Like they're not great when they score a goal. It's like they expect the team to just sort of, okay, we're going to lose the game now. We're not going to show any fight. And I think the same thing happened again against Montreal. So Montreal actually scores 2 goals in 7 minutes. And now you're down 2-1. You're chasing the game. And, I did think they'd have a chance to equalize, but definitely didn't go to plan.
Yeah, and Revolution got the first goal. And I think the second goal, the equalizing goal was great, really good finish. I mean, once the ball gets to that point, like you say, Prince Owosu's a really good finisher. He's a big presence. I thought he's a key guy. I don't know why Toronto let that guy go. Once it gets to that point, it's tough. That play needed to be stopped before that, and it could have been. There was an overplay. Somebody just made a huge defensive mistake. I think it was Yusuf, who's actually played really well, but one mistake with this team costs you, and that's not a good sign. Everybody makes mistakes, and teams that are good or decent that get by make up for those. They anticipate, they cover up for guys. Revolution doesn't have that, and that's one thing that's missing. Another thing about it, I got to say, there's 4 teams that are worse than the Revolution in the Eastern Conference. So it's. I don't think the season's going anywhere. Doesn't look like it, right? But there's teams that are worse. So it's a tough call. It's not. Things could be worse, but I think the problem is mentally. This team hasn't been together very long. So is there chemistry, right? Do they have resilience? Are they going to fight to the end? Can they find answers? They're not finishing, plays that could finish. The teams succeed, finish. Crosses are going through the penalty area with nobody. Those are the ones people got to finish. Clearances aren't being made by the other team, and the ball's just waiting for somebody to finish. So I think that's been a problem all year. It's kind of an intangible. It's an instinctive thing. Maybe this team just doesn't have that.
So it's interesting that you say that there are 4 teams worse than the Revolution. Coming into the game, I was getting my notes ready, and you actually sit there and you look at the standings and you look at the records. Montreal comes in 10 points behind the Revolution, who are 10 points behind a playoff place. So it's like New England, as of Friday morning, were equidistant, Montreal and a playoff place. And so I'm looking at that and I'm like, I don't think Montreal's that bad. Like, surely they've got some issues, but I think Donadel is going to go on to be a great coach. I certainly have liked what I've seen from Prince Owosu. And, it's really not a bad team. I think a lot of the struggles that they've had this year have been, they played a lot of their early games on the road. But, they haven't been as bad lately as they were at the start of the season. And now they're, of course, only 7 points behind the Revolution, which I'm not trying to say that's maybe I'm not trying to say that's like a badge of honor for Montreal. But point is, there were no pushover coming into Gillette Stadium. And I just wonder, are we underestimating how bad this team is right now, the Revolution? One thing I wanted to ask Caleb Porter, and I will ask him after training this week, is you followed up a 9-game unbeaten run with a 9-game winless run. Which version of this team do you think is closer to reality? And I'd be really curious to see what he has to say, Frank.
Yeah, that'd be a good question right there. I'm not sure if there is a definitive answer, but I did see in Montreal too. I thought the team was poised. They were composed. They believed in what they were doing, and they capitalized on mistakes. And, I thought they just had a way about them that didn't look like a team that was, the worst team in the league. Whereas the Revolution, I think they're playing with some doubts, some desperation, panic, not trusting each other at times. And just that's one thing that's a bad sign right there. And it doesn't matter what your record is, if it comes to that. So Montreal somehow, I think, credit to Donadel. I talked to him a little bit after the game. Great experience in Serie A. I think he will probably have some success as a coach, but at least he's got that team playing for him and playing for each other. Yeah,
absolutely. And, back to the drawing board for the Revolution. They've got this long week or 2 weeks, really. I agree with you, Frank. I don't think that they're really going to get anything out of this season. There's a lot more to talk about with the Montreal game, but let's just switch a little bit to the big picture. Mathematically, they've got a ways to go before they're eliminated from the postseason, but it's hard to see them making up the kind of ground just based on what we've seen from this team this season. And I agree with you. I think, going into the game and after they scored the goal, I sort of said to myself, no lead is safe. Certainly not a 1-goal lead with this team. But, sure enough, even against the worst team in the league, they cough it up. And around and around we go, Frank.
Yeah, I mean, we're trying to get off Montreal, but that second goal was a throw-in. I think a throw-in is really the easiest thing. You can't give up a goal off a throw-in. And, that's not coaching. That's just instinct. That's just people just, being committed. And, and they gave up that was just a key goal right there too. So, you just see bad signs all around. Third goal was off a throw-in too, but things were kind of wide open at that point. Carly's heel hits the underside of the crossbar with a right-footed shot that would have been 2-2, a couple other good shots. I think Chonkalai, if it's not happening for you, it's tough to stick with it. But that's a test for a team. Again, I don't think either one of us sees this team going anywhere, but it's basically a matter of faith and just hanging in there because look, people have contracts. They're going to be here. Nobody's going anywhere as far as players. They got to stick together and kind of figure out how to, make those, get past this where Carly's heel next time that shot goes in, Chonka's next time it goes in, and then it's, changes the whole complexion.
Well, I'm good with moving on from Montreal. We might come back and discuss some very small bits and pieces later, but I'm good to move on because you actually provided a really good segue, which is that these guys are under contract. They're here. I was taking a look at some of the finances of this team, Frank. And in the short term, it is going to be hard for them, I think, to make a move, certainly on the domestic market. They just don't have a lot of general allocation money available. I don't know who on this team they would be willing to move or another team would be willing to take. And then on top of that, their high income earners are here, most of them through 2027. Chonkalai, his contract runs through 2026. And I know that fans for the second consecutive game chanted for Caleb Porter to get fired. But the fact is, the next guy who comes in, whether it's Caleb Porter or someone else, is going to have to figure out what to do with these players. Because, they haven't delivered in 2025. But guess what? They're big earners and they're under contract for definitely next year and in most cases the year after that. And so to me, you can't just jump ship and expect expect something miraculous to happen in the transfer market. I think that's unrealistic. And so the coaching staff in one way, shape, or form, if it's not this year, then it's got to be next year. They have to figure out how to use these players, Frank.
Yeah, maybe they're not getting the best out of them, but does that mean that another coach would? That's always the eternal question. But if the team's putting out and giving everything they have for the coach, look at the other thing is we've talked about this before too. Caleb Porter was hired to play this style of this kind of tactics is what the Revolution wanted, and it looks like it's on paper that's how they should play. Yeah, there's a lot of security, all over the field and defense. There's plenty of opportunities offensively too. It's just not clicking. So, is that a chemistry thing, or do you just stay with these guys until it starts working, or what? I've been in doubt since day one that could happen because you're bringing in 15 new players and you're saying, all right, click, guys. But then I thought of San Diego, which was a totally new team too, right? Totally new. They didn't have a team before. There was nothing to build on. And they're, I think, in first place, in the West, they're doing really well. So it's possible, right? And, the Revolution management, coaches, administrators, technical directors, they've got more experience or as much as the San Diego guys. So they should be able to do it too. Now, like we're talking, they're kind of stuck with these guys or whatever you want to say, this roster. That's what it is. They've got to make it work. You've got to find some way to motivate and somehow, make this work because you can't make wholesale changes now.
Well, a lot of the core is gone though, Frank. So the team that was here that won the Supporter Shield, it's slowly being eroded. I think it started last year, trading DeJuan Jones and Henry Kessler. And then you had a few players age out. Certainly Tommy McNamara. Certainly Bobby Wood is another example of that. And then maybe they had a mixed record in replacing some of the bigger guys. So didn't really ever replace Buchanan. Maybe you can make a case that they've finally done that with Miller and Feingold. Petrovic, they certainly got right with Turner. But a striker still eluding this team. Carlos Heel looking a little bit one-dimensional when the other two DPs aren't on the field or they're just not as effective. And so I'm looking at, who the replacements have been and, have Mamadou Fofana and Brian Ceballos been on par with peak Henry Kessler and Dave Romney? I don't know. Is the depth being offered up by Keegan Hughes and Wyatt Omsberg as good as what Bruce Arena had? I don't know. I don't think so, just based on what the record is. And so, yeah, it's like the way that the team is meant to play. Like I get that that's the case maybe tactically, but I don't know if they've got the right players quality wise that can execute on those tactics, Frank.
Yeah, I think it really comes down to we end up talking about strikers. You really those guys need to put some goals away, and it's really extreme when you look at the goals that were missed in the last game, against Montreal were just unbelievable, really.
Well, it keeps happening, right? I mean, even against
Yeah,
Miami,
yeah,
with better strikers, they could have won the Miami game, Frank.
absolutely, yeah. And those are guys that put those away. So how do you explain that? I don't know. I think it's there's intangibles in this game. You can't even explain it, but those are the guys that need to put them away. I think Leo Campana had chances that he puts away, and he didn't even connect on one of them. Chanka, has missed a few. I think Chanka's kind of getting back into a groove though. But if those guys are striking on all cylinders, then it changes the whole equation.
Yeah, well, look, we were talking about that before Bruce Arena showed up, is that they needed an out-and-out striker, and Brad Friel couldn't get it done. Jay Heaps tried, but he couldn't get it done. And now, again, Caleb Porter and Kurt Onalfo try. They have big expectations of Leonardo Campana, but that hasn't worked out either. I remember going into the offseason of 2021, or excuse me, 2020, doing an article with Pro Soccer USA and asking some fans in the fort, like, what do you think this team needs? And all of them said a striker. Didn't matter that they had other guys on the field that were scoring goals. Lee Wynn was scoring goals at the time. They knew, and they were right. Lee Wynn is a midfielder, just like Carlos Gil is a midfielder. He should be setting up goals. He shouldn't always be the one putting them away. And that's exactly the trap that they've fallen into, either because of fitness issues or tactical issues or Leonardo Campana being out of form. It's kind of been the same old story, Frank.
Yeah, I mean, look at the scouting department brought in Adam Buxa and Bruce Arena and Kurt Onalfo brought in Gustavo Bo. That you're not going to do too much better than that. But since then, you haven't seen that, and I think that's one thing that covers up a lot of mistakes. Like you're not playing well, one of those guys gets a goal, right? Let's say the other team's playing great, and all of a sudden those guys they get a goal, and that's something that the team needs. And I think that Revolution do have just about everything else you need, at least to get by. I mean, look, I think that last game gives you the third time they've had more than a one goal loss, and two of those in the last three games. So they're in every game. If you're only one goal down in every game, almost every game in 90 minutes, really they were in every game within 90 minutes. They were within one goal until the Red Bulls game, right at the end. And, that's. I mean, if you can do that, you're probably okay. All you got to do is solve that problem up front. So,
well, the next game they have, Frank, is the Legends game. It's on August 9th. I'm trying to get all my ducks in a row to do a really good feature for the Boston Herald. So let's reflect on happier times because that's what it was for me. That 02 to 09 team. There was some residuals with 2014 as well and 2013 too. But that was peak Revolution. I still think that those teams, even though they didn't win an MLS Cup, are some of the best in league history. And so you get a lot of really great talent coming back to the team that's going to be in Foxborough. You got Taylor Twellman coming back, Joe Max Moore, Matt Reese will be there. Funny enough, there are a number of top players who right now won't be there. Some of them are on their own professional assignments. Steve Ralston coaching with the Quakes, Lee Wynn coaching in NWSL, and I'm sure you could go down the list. But yeah, I mean, just want to get your sense, Frank. When you look at players like Joe Max and Taylor Twellman, if they were still around today, you think they'd be able to add something to this team?
Yeah, good point. Yeah, well, those guys would for sure. I mean, look, Joe Max played, mostly in the second Bundesliga. He played in the Premier. He played a little bit in the Bundesliga. He was a real deal. Taylor, Taylor would be scoring goals. Yeah, they do need guys like that, and it's kind of too bad that even Lee Wynn, right? U.S. born, everything. Those guys would really, make the difference on a team like this. So it'd be good to see everybody, but yeah, it does bring back some pretty good memories.
Well, I'm sure they're hoping for some good vibes as well. Like that, to me, this is the game where you want to end the streak, right? Where you want to get a win at Gillette Stadium is when you've got all these legends in the house. And I was actually impressed with who they got. Like Taylor Twellman would come back for a game like this, but Joe Max Moore is pretty quiet. Walter Zenga is going to be back. He's a pretty quiet guy. I think he's still living in Europe actually. So that's a pretty good get. I don't know if they asked Jay Heaps to come. I don't know if Jay Heaps is going to be there, but you go up and down the list, and a lot of really impressive players that played for this club, Frank.
Yeah, it'll be great. Yeah, they really were, and a lot of those guys played, really put in a lot of seasons here, and were just part of the heart and soul of that team from 02, like you say, really probably 01, kind of started building. Fernando Clavillo really started building the team, and then Stevie Nickel solidified it, and it really lasted a pretty long time with a real core of players. I don't know. Did they say anything about Deuce? If Clint Dempsey comes back, it'll be worth the price of admission.
Deuce is not coming back, but he put on a show at the All-Star game. People were happy about that. That's another thing, right? So, everybody knows I'm not a big fan of the All-Star game, but that 05 team had 6 players called to the All-Star team. That's like a team record. It's never happened. Probably never going to happen again. I think most of those players were except for maybe Parkhurst, were alternates for the 06 World Cup. So at least 4, right? Twellman, Reese, Dempsey went, Ralston was an alternate. So that's 4 right there. Just goes to show you what a great team it was.
Yeah, and Shawree, would have been on the U.S. team if he hadn't declared for Grenada at some point. Bruce Arena really loved him. So, we all did. So that was just a special team. Jeff Laurentowicz was around. He's with Cincinnati as an assistant now, so he probably won't be there either. But even guys like that, Andy Dorman, who ended up going and playing a little bit in the Premier in Scotland, really good players. So, they were. The problem was that they just went as far as they could, and then couldn't keep that sort of formula that worked for getting players in there and building a team. But Stevie Nickel built a great team. Injuries hurt him, and bad luck hurt him, and it's the story of the Revolution. But that just made me think of something too. Last week, Julian brought up a really good point about maybe bringing in a team psychiatrist for the Revolution, and I thought it over a little more. I said that probably would be a good idea, but I started thinking that the psychiatrist could also help out, some of the fans and some of us that have been covering the team too, because we need it just as much.
Oh my God, Frank, you made it funny. Good job. You totally made me lose my train of thought too. Oh my God.
Well, I'm just saying you were on the right track though.
I think I was. I think I was on the right track. I now remember what I was going to say though. Is that okay? Back then they lost those MLS Cups because of bad luck. That's really what it was.
Yeah.
Now, never mind losing the MLS Cup. Getting there is not really a matter of luck as much. I think it's about what kind of a setup can you offer these international players to complement your domestic talent? And can you galvanize your fan base? Can you get momentum between your coaching staff and your top players on the field? Can you get your 3 DPs on the field at the same time? Are they really quality players? Especially now with Miami. I don't think Miami is necessarily guaranteed to win the Cup this year, but I guarantee you the team that does win the Cup is going to be able to go toe-to-toe with a super team. And when you look at just so many of these teams in the Eastern Conference, when you look at the Revolution, even when they were supposed to win it in 2021 and they didn't, I don't know if that team would have been able to handle the super team that Miami is now. And that just seems to be more and more the name of the game, Frank.
Yeah, right. I don't know if you can match that, but that's setting a standard. How did the Revolution get to that point? I don't know. I think it's always been in the last, say, since the early 2000s, get the new stadium, rebrand the team, and bring in some high-level, high-profile players. But that hasn't happened, and I don't think you can keep waiting on that either. Saying that is tough. I think you're going against teams like, players want to come to the MLS. I think that's true. Do they want to come to New England, right? Do they want to play on artificial turf? I think they're fighting a real uphill battle on that. So you got to find guys that are, just below that level. I think that's possible. But you're not going to get those those guys like Rodrigo De Paul and guys like that. So,
well, I guess, what's the model, right? Besides, like, a credible model for the Revolution besides try to get another Adam Buksa, try to get another Gustavo Bo, try to get another George Petrovic. Like, is that pretty much it, you think?
yeah, I don't know, but just thinking of this, like Caleb Porter brought Cucho Hernandez to Columbus. If Cucho Hernandez was on this team, the Revolution would be in, like, I don't know, they'd be in playoff contention for sure, right? He would have scored at least 2 goals last game because those balls that were going through the penalty area, Cucho Hernandez puts those away. Why the Revolution haven't been able to get a guy like that? I think that's a guy you could get. Okay, those are the kind of in between the cracks. A little bit played in Portugal, right? Didn't really make it there. Colombia national team on the edge, But guys like that in the MLS can thrive, and you need to get them.
Well, the fact that Columbus, based on what you're saying, is a better market for soccer than New England is really crazy. And you look at Porter, like, yeah, in Columbus, he had Tim Bezbachenko as the GM, and that's a whole other dynamic as well. But he built a team from scratch in Portland. He got Diego Chara. Did really, really well with Diego Chara. Mm-hmm. And it's been interesting that a lot of the guys that he's brought in, especially this year, have been on the defensive side. Everybody on the offensive side has really been kind of known quantities. I know Leonardo Campana, he was on a crowded Miami team, but was he better than Cucho Hernandez? I wonder if Caleb Porter wanted to pull for a bigger name player or just someone who would maybe be a little bit more dynamic, who wasn't coming from MLS. Maybe the assets just weren't there, but I think that there's a little bit of a difference in how they built out the roster in New England than what I would have expected them to do based on how he came in, Frank. He came in saying, I've got this blueprint that worked in Portland, it worked in Columbus, and especially after the first year where he was like, okay, well, it's not my team. I need to make it my team. January 2025 comes, he signs off and he says, this is my team. This is the identity that we wanted. Kurt Anolfo helped me build the team, and we're ready to go. And, it's just not what worked. It's not what we saw in Portland. It's not what we saw in Columbus. And I think a big part of that is what's going on up top.
Yeah, absolutely true. And then another point in common that those teams had, Portland, Columbus, was a guy named Darlington Nagbe that Caleb found when he was like 13 or 14 years old. And that guy, right, helped him win the championship first at Akron, in the NC2A, and then with two teams in MLS. And, that's really a key thing. So credit to Caleb for that. But he also brought in, like you say, all these guys. I can't even think of all their names. They all seemed to click. They were all kind of young, let's say, guys just on the way up that were dynamic, that just, got things done. And, it was great having Darlington Nagbe out there. But
Diego Valeri, another one.
Yeah, another one. Yeah, and just there's a bunch of guys, right? And I'm not seeing those guys show up here.
Yeah, and I think that's been a little bit confusing to me. And there are some things that I get that you can't get players like Rodrigo De Paul because of the turf. But I do think you can get players like Cucho Hernandez despite the turf. The fact that Jermaine Jones played on it, the fact that Adam Buksa played on it, Gustavo Bo, same thing. I don't think it's that big of a deal. Also, for a lot of these guys in Europe, the first things that the coaches will tell you when they come here for preseason is like, oh my goodness, the facilities are so great compared to what we have in Europe. It's true. I mean, even in the real soccer nations, the footballing nations, Spain, Italy, Germany, it's like the facilities are good, but they're not new. The fields are better here than they are in Europe a lot of the times. I know it sounds counterintuitive, but it's true. It's 100% true. The field at Tufts University and the field at Harvard that Roma plays on when they came here for preseason, better than what they have in Trigoria. And so where was I going with that? So a lot of these players, when they grow up in Europe, like they're playing on plastic fields, turf fields, concrete fields. It's not that big of a deal, especially when you're looking for your break. A guy like Adam Buksa was coming in looking for a break. Gustavo Bo, if he had met certain performance stipulations, he would have been a very, very rich man. So I think there is a way to get those players over here, Frank.
Yeah, there absolutely is. It just, is it? I think they have brought over. Some of these guys are good. I think the actual roster is like we say, it's okay. Now you need to finish it off. That roster is just not done yet. It's a race against time. Can you get guys in here? While this team still has faith in what they're doing, and guys don't want to leave or still on the upside, can you bring them in here? And time's running short for this year, and maybe for next year too. So I think you can do it. Yeah, I don't think they're that far off. Yeah, and guys will come, but it's not that far off the charts. But I will say this: if a guy does want to come to MLS, New England's not the first place he's going to look at, right? He's going to look at a place. There's like 26 or 5 teams that have grass fields, and 20 whatever that have better weather. So it can be done still, but
well, you say that, Frank, but a lot of these teams, they've got their rosters built up. You can't have any more DPs in Miami unless they change the rules.
Yeah, it's true. And you might have to pull some strings, change the whatever restrictions are, because I don't think the Revolution's done that too often. Sometimes you can get a favor done or whatever. I don't know what Miami does, but and you get somebody in here. So yeah, 1 or 2 different.
You get a Jermaine Jones blind draw, Frank.
That worked.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm curious, right? You're talking about just like the roster limitations. Where do you think they have some flexibility, or do you think that it's realistic for them to add anybody in this summer window, Frank? Or do you think it's wait and see until they figure out what to do with the coaching?
Yeah, no, I don't know what the restrictions are, but I just know that the plan was early in the before the season was they had a chance to bring in a third DP or 2 young DPs, and they said we're going to wait on that, see how it goes, and when the window opens up, then we're going to see what we need. And we're going to fill it with either 2 young DPs or 1, regular DP. I don't know what they call them, senior DP, let's call it. So I think they can still do that. I haven't heard any, names or anything like that, but I think they can do that. I don't know what the restrictions are, but they need to do that now.
And you think it would be better to do it now versus just throw in the towel on this season and wait and see what happens with the coaching?
Yeah, good question. I don't know what you do on that one, but I always say, look, if you can get a guy that's really good, get him. Don't wait. So, if they're not finding anybody and nobody wants to come, then yeah, of course, but don't wait. No, I would never wait. If you can get somebody, bring them right in.
One thing that we didn't talk about earlier on this evening is just the situation around Caleb Porter. We talked about it on the last show, but he is on the hot seat. And now, 2 games in a row, patches of fans at Gillette Stadium are chanting for him to have his job taken away from him. And, Caleb Porter, to me, from what I observe, is talking like someone who knows he's in a tough situation, but has assurances that he's safe for now. And I guess from your perspective, Frank, do you see anything changing on that front?
Yeah, no, I think he does have assurances, but I think, in any situation, you have to keep the locker room. He has to keep, if the players are playing for him and they believe in him, I think he should stay. If he loses the locker room, I don't care what the assurances are, it just doesn't work, right? But I think he does have assurances. I think you've put in a kind of a difficult situation when he came in here. And, we didn't know how difficult it was, but, I think he was given time to do this and a lot of freedom to remake the roster and put the tactics in that they wanted. So I think that's all there. Now, he just has to keep the team. If the team is with him, then he has a chance. The team has a chance to at least come out of this, maybe not make the playoffs, but at least finish the season, on a good note.
Well, you think he could realistically keep his job if he doesn't make the playoffs this year, Frank?
Yeah, but I'm just not sure if you can keep the faith of the team if you're not contending for the playoffs. Your credibility as a coach, your credibility is on the line every day. Every practice, every minute. And it's a tough thing. And I think Caleb and a lot of these guys that kept their jobs, long careers, they've been able to do that. You got to be resourceful. You got to be creative. You got to be really smart, and you got to pull the right strings. And really players are like, they're on the verge of, being with you or not all the time. So, I think he could, but I think he's got to show results, and the players have to get results. There's a fine line. There's a balance in there where, like, hey, we'll keep banging our heads against the wall here, but we got to break through at some point.
Well, you know what I wonder, and no one's really talking about this, is this group went through hell when Bruce Arena was suspended and then eventually resigned. And they were really kept in the dark, and the season really imploded after he went on leave, and it really took a nosedive after he resigned. And I'm wondering if ownership is looking at the situation. They're like, we don't want to make things worse than they already are. We don't want to create more volatility in the locker room, basically for the second time in 2 years. And I have to imagine that's a calculus too, Frank.
Yeah, absolutely want stability and consistency. And, I think Caleb's brought all that stuff. It's just not working out right now. Stay with it. Should on paper, it should work out. Some of those goals that they missed last game, they go in the next game, and that changes the whole dynamic.
I'll say this, though, Frank. If he does stick around into next season, it will mean that the leash is longer for him than it was for Brad Friedel, than it was for Jay Heaps, which I don't really know where that comes from. I don't know if that's just complacency, or you feel like Caleb Porter somehow got the short end of the stick, or he sold you on a rebuild plan and said, look, best case scenario, we win the MLS Cup in year one. Worst case scenario, we're still in rebuild mode in year three. I can't imagine it's something that ownership would have signed off on, though, Frank.
Well, yeah, I think, coach also has to be able to reinvent things, at times. And I think that's what's got to happen now. If Caleb can't regain the faith of the fans as well, and the credibility of the team, it's a long ways to go through next season too. There's 10 games left. These guys have to, we've seen it. Like you brought up two cases where coaches were basically left hanging. They had basically lost their way. Whoever's fault it was, they lost the team, and it just got worse and worse. So you can't let that happen either. It's not fair. It's not good. It's not good for the players. Not good for the team, fans. Not even good for the coach that's there. You've got to figure out what it takes, to turn this thing around.
Well, so the next part to that then is okay, how far does the fan outcry go? So it's one thing when fans in the fort and other parts of the stadium are chanting for Caleb Porter to lose his job. It's another thing if you start seeing many fans cancel their season tickets, which fans are starting to do. And I remember talking to Cathal Conlon a few weeks ago before the Messi game. He said year on year, the hardest group of fans to have renew their season tickets are the first-year season ticket holders. Now, if you're a season ticket holder, you take Caleb Porter out of it. They've won 2 games at home all year round. You got to see Messi play live, which is great, from a neutral perspective. But you'd expect them to be a little bit more competitive at home. And so there's a financial interest in going by the fans as well, Frank. And I'm wondering, how much runway does Caleb Porter get in that regard?
Yeah, if that starts going downhill too, then that's a sure sign that you're out the door. Usually the coach knows before anybody else that things ain't working out. It's not going to work. So I don't know. Maybe Caleb knows. Maybe he's confident he can keep it going. But yeah, when the season tickets start getting canceled and the team's not playing for you, the writing's on the wall. So I don't know if that's happened yet, but Caleb Porter's got to be able to, with the help of maybe assistant coaches and certainly the team, to turn it around. And it's not easy once it starts going the other direction. Like you said, 9 in a row, whatever it is now.
So me personally, I don't have anything concrete on this. If I did, I would report it. But my personal sense is that in the short term, the Crafts have made up their mind on what they're going to do. They may already know that Caleb Porter is not long for this job. They may just be waiting for the end of the season and they're going to run out the clock. And if some miraculous comeback happens, so be it. That'll be great. But I think they kind of get it. And to me, it's really similar to the situation they had last year with the Patriots, where they could have fired Gerard Mayo after week 7, 8, 9, and then they kept him on until the end of the season for a whole host of reasons. Partly that was out of, just out of respect for Gerard Mayo, who played for the Patriots. But I also think it has something to do with keeping the locker room stable. And so I, again, think it has something to do with deference to Caleb Porter, and just not wanting to throw the locker room into uproar again in a similar kind of situation as what they had when Bruce Arena left. That could be dead wrong, but that's just what I think. That's my best educated guess.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. I think, look, in 2002, Stevie Nickel was basically done. I think they had already set up his replacements and this and that, and then the team caught fire at the end of the season. I'm not saying that's happening this year, but that's what saved him. And he pulled a magical act, whatever he takes, to keep the team together, and they came through. Yeah, those decisions are made about now. They have to be. And then, like you say, if you turn it around miraculously, then you change the policy. But that's what's got to be done.
Yeah, and one of my other points this whole time has been, I think you got to look at the coach first, but I also don't think we've gotten the best version of the players. I don't think that, given how the roster has been constructed and what we've seen, particularly from the new players, that Kurt Arnolfo should go unscathed. Now, my sense is that if Caleb Porter goes, that doesn't necessarily mean Kurt's going to go either. And Kurt has a chance to make some moves. The window just opened last Thursday. We'll see what they do. But, maybe going back a little bit to what we were saying with the Montreal game, I think one of the things that I was really surprised by was that there just seemed to be a little bit of a lack of hustle, or just a resignment that Montreal was going to score a goal. It seemed like Prince Owosu and Olger Escobar wanted the ball more than any of the Revolution defenders. And I think that's what you don't want to see. And so that's where I have some sympathy for Caleb Porter, because, he's not on the field telling these guys to run harder, to mark tighter. To me, that's all on the players. And so I guess my main point is just that it shouldn't all fall on Caleb Porter, Frank.
Yeah. Okay. We did get a message, by the way, of a supporter that says he's canceling his tickets if Porter stays. So that's good input. Thanks for that. And yeah, I think on those things too, I think this team since the start has, what I see is guys unable to finish off rebounds, to finish balls that are coming through the penalty area, that instinctive thing that you got to have. And I haven't seen it with this team very much at all. But now, I'm wondering if it's a combination of that and guys, like you say, maybe just not hustling. And not hustling means that you have doubt, really. I mean, nobody's going to not hustle if they see a ball and they're going to score. I don't care where it is, anytime, you're just playing around anywhere, right? But if guys are hesitating because they think, hey, I better not go forward because I can't get beat going back, I'm in trouble then. If I don't get that ball, it doesn't go, I'm not a forward, whatever, you got to take a chance. You got to use your instincts. You got to maybe you're going to be out of position because you took that chance. And that's what makes the difference in games, and if that's happening, then that's a bad sign. But I think it's a team where I've seen both things happen. And that's why this team doesn't score goals when they need to. And maybe that's mentality.
Yeah. And I mean, that's something that we've covered a lot, right? It's the mentality on both sides of the ball. The stuff and I think Caleb Porter is starting to say this more often, which is, I think, another sign, right, that he feels like he's on the hot seat. I mean, there are plenty of signs for it, but he's starting to shift his answers a little bit, saying that, we don't call timeouts. It's between the ears, not his ears, their ears. And so I think that's a little bit of Caleb Porter showing his frustration too, because I think he does expect more of these players, but they just haven't delivered. One thing that I said in my spaces on Sunday morning, Frank, is that, we haven't seen a lot of some fairly key veteran players. One is Jackson Ewell, who's played in 6 games, even though he's on $1 million contract. And then Matt Marbies on the Spaces told me, I didn't know this, I haven't checked it, but I'm going to believe it's true, that Andrew Farrell is actually the longest tenured Boston pro athlete right now. And, Farrell's on the roster. He's also the only defender on this team that knows what it's like to play in big games, that knows what it's like to be in a playoff race. And I know he's a player coach. I know he's older, but I'm really surprised that we haven't seen a little bit more of him, Frank.
Yeah, I think Andrew was going to get a shot in the Open Cup, and I guess they probably said that's probably it. We want to build the team and this and that. So maybe that's what's going on with him. Yeah, I don't know.
But then you've got these assets tied up, right? With Jackson Ewell, and they're paying him a whole bunch of money, and it just doesn't seem like they're fully maximizing the value they have on the roster.
Yeah, I think they're saying Jackson Ewell was probably a mistake if they're not using him and paid him that. But that happens. They've gotten a lot of the roster right. I think you can't afford to make a mistake like that, maybe. But Bruce Arena made a couple of mistakes like that we all thought was a mistake, but somehow, they still won games, a ton of games. So you got to be able to. Players got to overcome mistakes on the field. Management got to make overcome mistakes that they made too, and you got to find some other answer.
Well, and Bruce Arena is just a master at that, right? He cut Josie Altidore 3 days after he scored a goal, and that was only the second goal he scored with the Revolution. Like, you couldn't make that up.
Well, I think everybody was calling for Josie's ouster from before he got here. Certainly the fans were. Josie was really good player. Bruce gave him his debut. Don't want to say anything bad about Josie, but it was time, for him, But saying that, Bruce, did, cover his mistakes. He had 5 strikers, right? So not all of those guys were going to come through. Not all of them were going to play. He was playing with 1 striker a lot, but he had 5 on the roster. I think in San Jose, he's got a ton of strikers, So I think that was a good way to go. We kind of questioned that, but I think that really worked. That worked for Bruce, and this team could use like at least 1 more striker or 2. So that's one way to cover up your.
Well, Frank, I'm really glad you brought that up, because I'm going to look this up right now, actually. So Bruce Arena goes and signs Joseph Martinez, who, for 2 or 3 solid seasons was the most feared striker in MLS. Okay? Joseph Martinez has 10 goals on the Earthquakes this year. He basically got him for nothing. Basically. And, to me, that's just Bruce being Bruce. He's like, okay, I guess I'll pick up this perfectly good striker that nobody wants and put him on my roster, and he's going to score 10 goals for me. It's like, yeah, sometimes you got it wrong, but a lot of times you got it right. And, the Revolution could have signed Joseph Martinez. Joseph Martinez has scored goals at Gillette Stadium. The turf wouldn't have been an issue for him. And it's just an example of Bruce Arena saying, okay, you guys think this guy's washed. I've seen him play. I've seen him score goals. Let's see what happens. And sure enough, he scored 10 goals for San Jose. No player on the Revolution has scored 10 goals this year. There's a guy on Montreal, like we said earlier, who has 10 goals on the worst team in the league. But no player on the Revolution has 10 goals.
Yeah, I think Chicho Arango is another one. Was rejected, because of whatever. And Bruce says, "I'll take those guys." Joseph's seen better days. He's probably on the downslide, because of the injuries. But yeah, Bruce is good at finding those guys. But you could bring up Josie and say, "Look, that wasn't the time to bring in Josie. He was pretty much done." So he'll make his mistakes too. But Bruce.
And it was a big mistake, but I think when you're able to sign players like Joseph Martinez and squeeze a little bit of value out of them, he's a double-digit goal scorer. I think that gets you some goodwill. When you're Bruce Arena, it gets you some goodwill. I think I don't want to put the blame on Caleb Porter, because I don't know if it was his idea at the end of the day to get Campana, but point is, when you've got other players available, I'm sitting here looking at reports out of Italy saying that Patrick Cutrone is getting monitored by a bunch of teams in Italy and DC United and Sporting Kansas City and the Revolution. Now, if any of these teams wants to sign Cutrone, that's going to be a multi-million-dollar transfer. He's going to be a DP in all likelihood. He's going to eat up a huge chunk of cap space. And meanwhile, Bruce Arena's like, oh, I don't have to scout this guy. I already know he's good. He's available. Let me just take him. And there's something about not reinventing the wheel that's always worked for Bruce Arena. And, I think most Revs fans, given the choice, would say, yeah, Martinez over Campana, hands down.
Yeah, no, Bruce did. But also remember, Bruce brought in Gustavo Bo on a pretty good transfer. I think they tried to make out that deal was worth, I don't know, $15 million. It wasn't the total transfer fee was whatever, 8 or 9. But you might have to do that again now. And if you think about it, I don't think they've done anything like that. They haven't really made a move as bold as that since then. And that was like a great move, right? So if you did that, I think Cutrone would probably cost that much, but that's a bargain, really. I mean, he's a proven scorer in Serie A.
So I want to acknowledge something else that Paul Weick said in the chat. Another problem I have with Porter is that he does not develop younger players, which is a shame and a detriment to the Revs' future. So I mean, I'm gonna give him some credit here. I think this is a legitimate point. Of course, they have Revs too. He did promote Keegan Hughes. You've seen some other guys get their first team contracts, which is positive for them. But then, we're coming off a weekend when the Revolution's former local talent, Olga Escobar, scores against them, basically puts the game away. That's a massive kick in the teeth, Frank. And they gave him away for almost nothing. Noel Buck, another player, gets traded to San Jose. Now, they do retain the sell-on fee for Noel Buck. But I think Caleb Porter was just like, he's not really in my plans. He's a good player. Let's get as much money we can out of him. And, he can reunite with Bruce Arena in San Jose. Now, saying that, I don't know if Noel Buck has done too much out there in San Jose. He didn't do much, on loan with the second team with Southampton either. But I think the point is valid, where Bruce Arena was giving some of these younger guys a shot. Certainly right now, you would think that with the team not having too much to lose, you could afford to give some of these younger guys minutes. Jack Panayiotou hasn't had much of a look either. You feel like there'd be opportunities. And Bruce was always really good at picking the right times. He'd put them in for 15 minutes in the Leagues Cup game, which doesn't really mean much in the grand scheme of things. He'd find a way to give guys a spot start, and even if he was going to take them out at halftime. For the most part, it's been kind of the same cast of characters with the first team, unless there's been an injury, unless there's been a suspension. Bruce was just a little bit better at rotating the team. And I don't know if that's a coaching issue with Porter, or if that's just a lack of faith with the players, or, if some of these players have first team contracts that they don't deserve. But I think it's a good point. It's a point well made.
Well, but I think you got to bring up the fact that Peyton Miller's out there and Eli Feingold too. I think 17 and 20. That I don't think you can have that many more young guys out there, to tell you the truth. So I don't know if that's the case. I think Holger and even Noel Buck, I think they weren't in the plans. I think it's good to move them on because it gives them a chance to find something else if they're not going to play here. Escobar might have been a mistake. I hear he could get some offers from Europe. I mean, Noel got injured, but it's a tough call every time on those things. But I think having those two outside backs like that, young guys, that's definitely a point in Caleb's favor.
Well, sure. But Feingold was established playing for Maccabi Haifa, playing in a competitive confederation. He was in the mix for the Israel team. He's also not a New England product. So Miller, certainly, but then, they sell Bayraktarovic because they have to, and they should. Noel Buck, I don't think he was ever really integrated in the way that Caleb Porter wanted to play Frank. And, maybe this was just the natural way to end things with Noel Buck. But coming off of the Montreal loss where Escobar scores, I think it's a good point. And it's really hard to see that they're paying attention to their younger players in the same way as the Bruce Arena era, because, when everyone's firing on all cylinders, everybody looks good. And that was the case in 2021. You put anybody on the field and they were going to win games. A little bit different now.
Yeah, Tico Rivera, I think, came in then too, and Bruce used him and scored a goal in his first start. But Tico hasn't really established himself anywhere else too well, so it's a tough call. I don't know. I'm not sure there's anybody else that could really come up and make a difference. Like you say, if the team's firing on all on cylinders, you can put guys in, you can do stuff, but otherwise, you're putting them in tough situations. I think Keegan Hughes really got burned against the Red Bulls. Not all his fault. I mean, that particular lineup was not looking good that night, right? And he's the last line of defense. He ends up in a tough position. So, that's a tough call. You got to get a right situation for these guys, and this year just hasn't been that right situation for a lot of guys. So,
well, I feel pretty good about ending it there, Frank. We've been on for about an hour. It's also very, very hot in both in both our necks of the woods. So we will leave it there, but we'll be back likely to preview the Legends game on August 9th against DC United, certainly to cover the DC United game on August 9th. Make sure that you follow Frank on X at Frank DeLappa. Follow me as well at Julian Cardillo. You got to subscribe to the Boston Globe to get Frank's coverage of the Revolution. You also have to subscribe to the Herald, which is $1 for mobile access for a whole year, which is a pretty good deal in my opinion. Basically, you sign up and every day you get a little digest that gives you the e-edition of the Herald. You can get my coverage. You can also sign up for the Cover the Pitch Substack, which I run, and you should definitely like the Cover the Pitch videos and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Frank, you have a last word?
No, Paul Weick says thanks to us, so we thank him for the input too. It really helps. Thanks.
Absolutely, yeah. We're trying to grow this. If the original watchers are going to get rewarded in some way at some point in time, and we got to get back to getting some high-profile guests on, Frank.
Yeah, I think look at change of fortunes in the team. Sometimes it's easier to get guests and do everything else and get the show going when the team is decent, right? So let's get back to that.